Hello and good morning, and welcome to an Elevenses special. You're watching Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills Rider Training, and today's special topic, which is pre-recorded because I'm out and about enjoying a couple of days of holiday, is how to stay warm on two wheels. Now, probably notice that we've moved into autumn and the days are now beginning to shorten fairly rapidly. And whilst we hopefully still have a few days of pleasant weather in front of us, with a bit of luck, we could hang on to some warm sunshine until October. The mornings are already getting distinctly nippy, and the heat wave we had back in the beginning of August is already a distant memory. Now, looking at the sales charts for the last 6 months or so, scooter and small bike sales are up by some margin. And what that argues is there are a lot of new riders out there who may not have ridden in cold weather yet. They probably only experienced the warmer spring and summer weather. Well, now's the time to actually get prepared so that you are ready when the frosts arrive, if that's the category of rider you fall into. But even if you're an experienced rider, if you switch from using the bike on summer only days when it's nice to all year round commuting on two wheels, then the impact of the winter weather could still come as a bit of a shock to you. So how do we stay warm on two wheels? Well, my experience, as you probably know, background as a motorcycle courier for 16 years. I spent another 12 years or so working as a full-time basic trainer, as well as running my advanced courses. So over those years, I have ridden in virtually all weathers you could care to name. And in fact, I've ridden in worse weather than many riders have experienced, because I was also a blood runner for 5 years, and I got called out in conditions that it's just about as bad as you can imagine. Frosty mornings, falling snow, minus 10 Celsius at 3 a.m. on a January morning. Okay, how do we stay warm on the bike? Well, I've tried just about every solution possible. The time-honoured way is to layer up, and basically each layer that we add to our clothing traps there between our garments, and it acts as a layer of insulation, thus retaining our body heat. So the colder it gets, the idea is that we add more and more layers. And there are plenty of garments, everything from zip-out thermal layers, which you find attached to a lot of motorcycle clothing, right down to the expensive base layers and insulation layers that you'll find sold by typical motorcycle shops. But there are disadvantages, and the one that's fairly obvious is that the more layers that we wear, the more we end up looking like the Michelin Man, and we lose a lot of body flexibility. Basically, if we're struggling to look over our shoulder because we've got so many layers on top and bottom, then it's not easy to actually physically ride a motorcycle. But the trouble is, we need those layers to stay warm on the bike. Thick gloves are an option as well. You'll see lots of riders wearing very thick winter gloves. I hate them because one of the things I discovered when I was a courier was that they impeded my use of the controls. It's all okay if you're just riding up a motorway and nothing untoward happens, and you just basically have to put the bike in top gear, ride it for 20 miles and then change down back to first as you park it, no problem. But when you're in and out of traffic all day long, every day, and you're taking evasive action, you're trying to use the indicators, the horn, and everything else, then all of a sudden those thick gloves actually become a bit of a liability. So we end up struggling to control the motorcycle. Far less obvious is a second problem, though. The insulation can never completely prevent heat loss. Once it's colder on the outside of the body than it is on the inside, then we've created what's called temperature gradient, and heat will eventually move across that gradient from our body to the outside world. we simply can't stop that. Of course, the body does have some ability to heat itself. That's why we can feel perfectly warm on a day when the temperatures are in the mid-20s, even though body temperature itself is around 37 Celsius. We're losing heat to the outside world, but we're generating heat on the inside, so we maintain an equilibrium. But the thing is, as the outside temperature drops, then eventually the body starts to lose more heat than it can replace, and we chill. And that's why we need more clothes on a cooler day, because those clothes act as insulation. But there is always a point where if it's cold enough outside, then whatever we wear, we will leak more heat away from the body than the body can replace. And then we get cold. Pretty obviously, the worse our clothing is at keeping us warm, and the colder the day, the quicker we get cold, particularly if it happens to be wet at the same time. There's another story, and I'll come on to that in another episode. Now, it's true that if you're only riding short distances, 30 minutes, even perhaps an hour on the bike, and if you've got half decent bike clothing, you'll probably not notice any significant chilling effect. But the problems really arise if we take longer trips when it's cold, or if it gets exceptionally cold. Now, research suggests that mild hypothermia isn't uncommon when we're actually riding a motorcycle. In fact, it's likely that anybody who's ridden the PTW in winter has probably suffered hypothermia. How do you know? Well, it's easy enough. If your muscles get stiff and unresponsive, that's a sign that you're in the first stages of hypothermia. And even at those low levels, you probably haven't noticed, but your brain function is almost certainly impaired. We start making poorer decisions, and we take longer to make those decisions too. So I hear somebody out there already saying, but my body's toasty warm with all my clothing. It's just my hands that are cold. And all I need is a pair of heated mitts or gloves. Now, rather than give you the correct answer to that statement right away, I'm going to ask you a question. What happens if we do a lot of hard exercise and gets very warm? What happens to our hands in particular? Well, the answer is our hands get hot, don't they? And it's a response of the body's thermoregulatory system kicking in. And what happens is blood from our overheating body core gets ducted down the arms, through the arteries, down the forearms, into the hands, into the fingers. And by opening up all the little capillaries, which as much of that hot blood flows just under the skin and as close to the surface as it possibly can. And because it's close to the surface, the air over the skin cools that blood, and then the cooler blood goes back up the arm through the veins into the body core, and it takes, so basically we're working as a heat exchange system, taking away heat from where it's not needed and taking it out to the environment. So we end up cooling our body down. And now remember those words, body core, because that is going to be the key issue in my explanation. Now, what happens when our hands get cold? Well, basically, it's simply the same effect, but backwards. Now, it's the body's ability to generate enough heat to counter the cooling effect of the outside world, which is being pushed to its limits, and the blood in the core is now chilling. So when that starts to happen, to keep that body core as warm as possible for as long as possible, the body's thermoregulatory system steps in again. But this time it's to prevent heat loss from the skin. So the first thing to go are those tiny capillaries just under the skin where that warm blood was flowing to cool us down. That gets shut down. And that's why, as we start to get cold, the first thing that we notice is our skin actually feels cold to the touch. In the next stage, the bigger vessels that go through the peripheral parts of the body, so maybe down the fingers, down the toes and back again, they get shut down. So next thing is our fingers start to get cold, our toes start to get cold. Now, and this is the trap that we can easily fall into. What it means is that whilst hot grips and hot gloves feel nice, that's just about all that happens, is they feel nice. What they're doing is that the warmth that's coming into the glove is actually fooling the nerves in our fingers. We cannot feel the cold that is the cold blood, because the warmth from the heating element is fooling the nervous system. So the gloves and the grips don't actually generate much heat, not enough to actually start feeding hot blood back into the body core. So what it means is that even though we feel our fingers nice and toasty, the muscles themselves back up in the forearm that work the fingers will progressively stiffen up as they chill and the blood supply gets shut down, and our ability to do things like operate the controls will deteriorate. So essentially, the problem with hot grips and hot gloves is that we're treating the symptom and not the disease. And of course, eventually, if we get cold enough, then the supply to all the hands and feet and the arms and legs all gets shut down, and it keeps the remaining blood that is still moderately warm in the body core, and that circulates up and down to the brain where it's most needed to keep us alive, basically. Ultimately, the blood supply to the vital organs goes too, and then we're into some really serious hypothermia, and that's when people actually die. So feeling cold is actually a warning sign. It's not something that's just uncomfortable we should be toughing out. It really isn't. It is actually a warning sign that hypothermia isn't that far away. So, okay, if gloves and grips are the wrong answer to the question, what's the right answer? And the answer is heated clothing. And heated clothing can add heat to keep our core temperature up. So our first investment, if we want to stay warm on a motorcycle, is a heated waistcoat or a heated jacket. And I would start with a jacket. The key point is that this heated clothing, and I've got something here which I'm just going to take off and show you, is that it adds the heat to the body core. And what that does is that it feeds the heat to the body core, and that hot blood then flows out through the rest of the body. So as you can see, it's a fairly straightforward waistcoat. It's a bit difficult to see it black against the colour, but there we go. It's just a zip-up waistcoat. It's got no sleeves. It's just a Gillette GA style garment. And you can see it's also thin, lightweight, and it goes under virtually any clothing, unless you've got skin-tight leathers. Okay, so what does this do then? The answer is that it pumps, as I say, it ensures that the blood continues to pump around the extremities. So the best that layering can do is slow down the rate of loss. Hot grips, hot gloves won't reverse that. They just make the fingers feel nice and warm. But I have a really hard time persuading people this is the case, because again, you know, they feel they're cold in their hands, but they think that their body's nice and toasty. But the thing is that your fingers have lots and lots and lots of nerve endings in them, so we're really sensitive to cold fingers and to a lesser extent cold toes. You do not have nerves that sense heat in the body core, so you cannot feel your core getting cold right up to the point where you actually start shaking from cold, and then you're into a fairly serious level of hypothermia. So by using heated clothing, you can actually cut down on the layering, so you look less like the Michelin Man, which was the point I was making earlier, and that gives you more control over the motorcycle. So hot clothing ensures blood pumps out to the extremities, and fingers may feel cold, but they won't go numb. Now, when I'm working in winter months, I'm usually riding for several hours on the trot. So I'm not just doing a 30 minutes or an hour's commute. I'm out there for some hours. So I'm in a pretty high risk group for hypothermia. But with my heated vest there, I usually only ever wear unlined summer gloves. The thickest pair I've got is what most people would describe as a spring autumn glove with a light lining. But there's certainly nothing like the thick, clumsy winter gloves that you see sold in bike shops. I don't even own a pair of those anymore, and my fingers sometimes get a bit chilly, yeah, but they never go numb and stiff like they used to. So, okay, Get yourself a hot vest, a hot jacket. Why would I recommend the vest? First of all, well, they're usually a bit cheaper. The arms on the jackets are nice, but you tend to have to fit those down the sleeves of a jacket. And generally speaking, it's usually easier to get something on your torso than it is down the sleeve of a jacket. Would I buy a one-piece textile with a built-in heated element? No, I wouldn't, because if the heating element fails, you're going to be throwing the whole jacket away. I would definitely get the liner rather than the whole hot jacket. Now, okay, say you've got one of those, and say you are still suffering from cold hands. A friend of mine, for example, has what's sometimes called white finger. There is a technical term for it, but I can't remember what it is. But she suffers from that, and it's triggered by vibration, but it's made far worse by cold. And what she does is she has a heated waistcoat like I do, but she daisy chains a pair of heated gloves off the end of the waistcoat. So that way you can keep your core temperature up and get the fingers feeling toasty as well. Now, something else that people worry about is the current draw. I've heard people saying, oh, I wouldn't run something like that, it will flatten my battery. Well, quite frankly, unless you're running something with a really primitive charging system, you really should be able to power heated clothing without too much problem. All you need to do is check the specs for the alternator output, and then check how much you're drawing for other bits and pieces on the bike. Add a few for the ignition system and the fuel pump. But basically, if you've got, look at the numbers that you've got for the lights. If you've probably got, I don't know, 20 or 30 watts free, you should be able to run a sort of a fairly bog standard heated waistcoat without too much trouble. I've run that particular heated waistcoat from the 100-watt alternator, which is on my classic 250. I can just about run the lower powered kidney belt, which I'll show you in a moment, with a 60-watt headlight bulb on at the same time. So okay, the heated waistcoat won't work with headlight, it will flatten the battery, but the kidney belt does work. And that's got a very low powered alternator by modern standards. You know, some 125s will be down there, but you know, honestly, most things should power it. And if your bike's not up to it, then you can get heated clothing with lithium-ion battery packs built in. How much do you need to spend? Well, you know, it's like most things, sky's the limit, but I've just looked and seen a heated waistcoat in a sale for £70. You'd need to spend a little bit more on the battery pack and the adapter to go with it, but it's not going to break the bank. And if you really are skint, Maplin's used to sell a heated battery-powered sort of fleecy waistcoat. I had one of those as well. I've still got it. It won't keep you warm off the batteries for much more than an hour before the batteries need recharging, but hey ho, if you're doing a 30-minute commute, you can take your battery charger to work with you and recharge the batteries while you're there, and you've got a heated waistcoat. It's not a powerful one, but it keeps the chill off. It will do the job for a short ride. Okay. The second plus for heated clothing is that, generally speaking, it lasts well. If you think about the wiring in a vest, it just sits on you, it hangs, it doesn't flex. My original Gerbing vest lasted over 12 years, and my current EXO 2 kidney belt, which I shall just reach down. I was going to show you this. It's a kidney belt, literally just goes around your waist. It's an EXO 2 model. You can see the flap there. That's the place where the battery pack would go. If I was going to use a battery pack, it's stretchy, it's Velcro secured, and you just stick that around your back and plug it in, and away you go. I've said that one runs off the 250 without too much trouble. I've had this 14 years. Okay, it doesn't get used every day of the winter, but it does come out fairly regularly, and it's still working. And again, the reason is that it doesn't really get bent, so the wiring doesn't get damaged. One of the things that you'll find with hot grips, and to a lesser extent hot gloves, is that the wiring rarely lasts more than a year, in my experience. When I used to use hot grips on the dispatch bikes, I would generally fit them October, November, and by sort of March, April, the one on the twist grip side normally had failed because the wire's constantly flexing there, and so the internals just fail. There are better ones available. Honda and BMW offer some pretty high quality heated grips, but they are expensive. And the thing is, of course, you're probably giving them away when you get rid of the bike as well. With heated clothing, you can just remove the wiring and transfer it straight to the new bikes. And the second problem, if you have multiple bikes, you need multiple hot grips if you're going to use them in winter. With heated clothing, you just need an extra loom for each bike, probably even make it yourself without too much drama, and then you wear your one hot piece of clothing on whichever machine you're riding. To be honest, gloves, I've had a bit of better luck with gloves. They have lasted a little bit better than hot grips, but my brother a couple of years ago bought an extremely expensive pair of gloves after I'd advised him to go and get a waistcoat. He went down the notice my hands that get cold route and bought a pair of gloves, and they cost him nearly £200, and he returned them 3 times in one winter before he actually got to the following spring. So I've tried all sorts of layering techniques to stay warm, everything from newspaper and bubble wrap, which actually is quite a good emergency technique. I've bought £100 plus thermal shirts, which allegedly worked up Everest. Well, the only thing I can say there is that it must have been a very warm day on Everest when they were taken up there. And quite frankly, nothing has worked as well as a heated waistcoat. And the big plus of a heated waistcoat, you can just switch it off. You don't have to unlayer and find somewhere to carry all the stuff that you've just taken off when it warms up. And that, I tell you, is really useful when you're going from not very far above sea level to several thousand meters high in the mountains, and the temperature drops from 20 plus to maybe freezing, and then goes up again on the way down. That's when heated clothing becomes really, really useful. So, okay, trust me on this one. Once you have used heated kit, you really will wonder how you ever managed without it. So have a look around. There's stuff to suit all budgets. Everything, as I said, from sort of like this kind of kit that was sold by Maplin when it was open. You can still find that on the internet, sold by outdoor centres, right up to the sort of motorcycle specific kit, which is increasingly pricey, but you can find pretty much something to fit all budgets. All right, okay, that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in to Elevenses, and I'll see you again live at the weekend. Right, bye for now.